So yeah, it's a real pleasure for me to be supporting. I was talking to Catherine earlier on this week, and I really enjoy the fact that I've been working with her, but working in order to bring her idea to life. So I want really to give Catherine a lot of credit for suggesting us doing this evening. And it's a real pleasure for me to introduce her, actually. She's our first speaker of the evening. She's going to say a bit more about the theme of the night and what we are going to be doing that. But I just want to say very briefly, Catherine recently became a Mitra in an event here at in this shrine room back in May with another 8 friends from the Sangha. And I have a very special connection with Catherine. Catherine is somebody who is, I feel like it's a real diamond. She has a very sort of a truthful energy, and it's a kind of, she can be very frank in her communication, and it's like a, just down to earth, really direct and clear. And I admire Catherine, actually. I really admire the way that she has engaged with her journey in allowing doubts to be there, and to clarify in its own time. And then something emerging, that clarity of the diamond emerging from that process. So I'm very glad that she's sharing tonight, the beginning of the evening, with us. So over to you, dear Catherine.
Thank you very much for that, Arivachin. That was really nice. So I'll start by inviting you all to close your eyes, actually. So I know that everyone visualizes in different levels of detail, so just do your best. And I want you to imagine that it's a warm summer's day and you're in a public park. So just see the children on the swings and the slides, see the families and the couples at the picnic benches or lounging on the grass, see the ice cream van parked nearby, serving a line of excited kids. Just see everyone relaxing with each other and chatting. Soak it all in. Now, open your eyes and ask yourself, were there any people of colour in your park? Was there anyone with a visible disability? Were there any same-sex couples? And what were the ages of the adults that you saw? Now, you all probably saw different things in your park. So when I first did that exercise on a citizens advice training course, I can't take credit for that exercise, everyone in my park was white, heterosexual, young or middle-aged. Nobody had a visible disability. And that's because that park was reflective of my conditioning and not of what society actually looks like. So tonight is 2 things, really. So first, it's a celebration of the diversity of our Sangha. And of course, diversity simply refers to variety. So in humans, that can be race, cultural background, religion, sexual orientation, gender identity, age, but it can refer to anything that's different about us. For example, whether we're parents, non-parents, what occupations we do, our hobbies and our interests, our political views. And tonight will be a chance to hear talks from our diverse Sangha, from voices that have been shaped by experiences and conditioning that's different from our own. And that's very important, which leads me on to my second point, the second thing that tonight is, other than a celebration. It's also an invitation to look inwards, to recognize our ignorance, that is to say, our state of not knowing the true nature of reality and how things really are. And a part of recognizing our ignorance is to become aware that we're conditioned beings and that this conditioning affects how we view the world. We can then make inquiries. So, for example, why did my park look how it did? And how might the way I see that park subtly or even subconsciously affect how I respond to and view other people? So to be human is to be conditioned and to be shaped by that conditioning. So I imagine that most of us here will call ourselves welcoming and accepting of all people, and we most likely are. But it's the deeper parts of ourselves that can still subtly influence how we view others, how we relate to them, and how awake we are about other people's experiences and their conditioning too. And often this can be without us realizing it, and when there's no malice or ill will behind it. So yeah, as humans, our conditions are endless and they're everywhere. But the big ones could be how we've been brought up, who we've been exposed to, the things we've been taught, what's present in our society, because we're also part of a collective conditioning as well. So here in the West, we need to consider our past of racial enslavement, class divide, colonialism, treatment of certain groups throughout history, and how this may have molded our society, because this collective conditioning may influence us as individuals too. So essentially our internal and external worlds are conditioning each other to create the reality we see, to create the park we see. So for example, I grew up in a very white middle-class village in Nottinghamshire. There were literally about 6 or 7 children of colour in my entire school. All my friends at university came from similar backgrounds to me. Most of my friends outside the Sangha are young, unmarried, childless, white, atheist. So because that's my conditioning, I have certain blind spots. So when George Floyd was murdered and I started reading a little bit more into it, I couldn't actually sort of believe the extent of that particular issue. I just had no idea. Not because I didn't care, just because I lacked that experience and awareness. You know, I was in a conditioned bubble, so to speak. So there's always inner work to be done for all of us. And the great news is that Buddhism can help us with that. So Buddhism is about really developing a kindly awareness of our conditioning to move forward. Kindly in reference to developing metta, and awareness in reference to developing insight or wisdom into the way things really are and past concepts and constructs. But it's one thing to understand that on an intellectual level, but we need to feel it and make it part of ourselves. So how can we start to transform our ignorance into wisdom? Well, there are 3 methods of training in wisdom that are commonly taught in Buddhism, and they are sort of progressive stages, really. So learning and listening is the first. So try and take the time to learn and listen to others, whether that's through talks, through joining groups, perhaps white affinity groups, reading books, news articles, and talking to people in the Sangha and in wider society. So just get curious about yourself, really, and about society. Listen deeply and attentively. So we're going to do some learning and listening tonight with our guest speakers. And the next stage in this sort of progressive stage is thinking and reflecting. So unless we think and reflect and basically mentally interact with what we've heard or read or learned, we're not likely to remember it or make it part of us or even put it into practice. So discussing what we've learned with others and reflecting deeply over time, the repetition of practice and learning and reflection will allow our realizations to sink in more deeply. And the final stage is meditation. So meditation is our chance to integrate what we've learned and reflected on into our time on the cushion. So to try and have a direct experience of these teachings that's beyond words or concepts. So we change, we're a different person every time we sit on the cushion, even in sort of very subtle ways. So meditation is a chance to witness that, really, and to bring it into our being. So, and as we know, cultivating wisdom and metta on an inner level will then go on to influence our action and our speech in the wider world, and hopefully in a positive way. So much of our behavior is cyclic or reactive. So the beauty of the Dharma is that it enables us to lay the inner foundations to act more creatively. And this will, of course, include how we respond and behave towards and relate to other people. So, for example, if somebody disagrees with us or has a different view or experience to us, we may have a variety of different reactions, and so might they towards us. So we should remember that other people's views, feelings, actions, and speech are because they, excuse me, are also formed by their own conditioning too. So with practice on and off the cushion, we start to see how universal suffering is, how universally everyone is conditioned, and how universally everyone has that capacity to transform. And knowing that, we immediately have something in common with other people, and we can be more calm and understanding and constructive in our speech and behavior. So that's sort of the beginning of evolution, really, as an individual and as a wider society. So I'll finish by saying that I have a great faith in our ability to transform on these deeper, sort of more subconscious levels. And I particularly have faith in the three jewels' ability to guide us in that transformation. And yeah, I'm just really looking forward to hearing our guest speakers tonight. So I'm going to hand over to Ari Vachin so he can introduce our first speaker.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, dear Catherine. Yeah, that was really good. Yeah, quite as I said before, it's a sort of a frank, honest examination of our own baggage, in a way, in our condition. And so all of us have something to look into, and hopefully tonight will be an opportunity for that. And we can think. I really like the way Catherine has brought that teaching, that beautiful teaching of the three levels of wisdom in the Buddhist tradition. And the individual path is important, but also we need others. Yeah? We need others in a way to reflect the efforts of our individual journeys. So we're going to be looking at 4 mirrors tonight, if you want. And I want to invite another very dear friend of mine in the Sangha that I have had the privilege to witness her journey as well, as much as I have done with Catherine. And that Gita became also a mitra recently in May with Catherine here in a ceremony in this shrine room. And Gita is somebody that has seemed very, very close to the moment I arrived in Nottingham, probably 5 years ago. And a quality that Gita has is that of energy. She has a very natural enthusiasm for things. She's a loving person. She's very willing to love and to care for things. Sometimes I feel like when I'm with Gita, it's like being with a puppy. They say it has all that energy. Yeah, really wants to do things, want to go there and here and that, and very ready to engage, with whatever it is. But there is an exception. I don't know if Gita is going to talk about this, but a year ago, I was putting together this context within the Sangha of the people of color group, and I invited Gita, and Gita said no to me. So it was one of the few things that Gita has said no to me, and that was an interesting exploration. Just waiting for Gita to find out, her own way of connecting with that. I'm very glad that she found a way of connecting with the idea of a people of color group, and she's been a very supportive member of that group. Yeah, and I don't know what Gita is going to say, but I'm really, really looking forward to hear what you have to offer tonight, dear Gita. So over to you.
So thank you for a really lovely intro. I'm going to reflect on that a bit later on, I think, and really soak that up. But thank you for all those kind words. So yeah, I was asked by Catherine if I would speak tonight, just about really how I have come to Buddhism, and maybe a little bit of reflection on any elements within that really that I want to draw out, I guess. So I kind of had to think about what I was going to say, and I'm going to start off by saying that I think I started to turn towards Buddhism before I even knew what Buddhism was, and I was working as a physiotherapist in a really sort of busy hospital, city hospital, acute care, and I was finding myself getting a bit despondent. This is probably around 2010. You know, I liked my job. I got a lot of job satisfaction, but I think I was getting really dissatisfied, and I was kind of ignoring it, as you do. And what happened was that my other half got an invitation to teach in Tanzania, and by this time I was pregnant with my third child, and it just seemed like too good an opportunity to miss. So we went over when she was 6 weeks old. We went over and we were there for 2 years, and it gave me space. You know, I was off the hamster wheel, and you know, it just gave me space for something other to happen. And we were in a really rural area with a much more simple way of life. You know, back to basics in a way, although kind of not as well. But we were very, very much saturated in nature. So I think I sort of reconnected. I started to reconnect with myself in that time. But we came back in 2013. I went back to the same job, and you know, quite surprisingly, I was looking forward to coming back, but I was also quite dissatisfied again with that job. So I started to look around for a different role as a physio, and I heard of a job in the pain team. So this is at City Hospital again, and the pain team kind of sit out by themselves. They're kind of a little bit isolated. No one really knows about them, and if you kind of hear anything about them, it comes with a bit of a stigma, really. Oh, you don't want to work there. No, they're all depressed, those patients. You don't want to work there. But I did go and work there, and so I started to hear about mindfulness, because it was one of the treatments that was used with people who are trying to manage their pain and their suffering. Didn't really know what it was, didn't really kind of want to do it, you know, but it was part of my work. So I started to experience meditations and my colleagues teaching it. And a very, very influential person in my journey is Kate, who's here tonight, who I worked with. She pretty much brought me to Buddhism, to be fair, because we started to go to drop-ins in a bit of an ad hoc way, which was really, really nice and positive. So I was sort of developing my practice, but all the while kind of really not having a clue what I was doing. Really didn't. Felt a bit of pressure at work, actually. I was like, what, they want me to teach this stuff? I had no idea what I'm doing. Anyway, then I think I did an 8-week mindfulness course that Kate led. Again, didn't know what I was doing, found a lot of resistance there, and found it difficult to practice, which again is a bit of avoidance, really, now that I think on it. But I was getting something here, though, you know, even though all that was happening, I was quite drawn to it, and that curiosity outweighed anything else, I guess, the resistance and the difficulty. So Kate and I signed up to do the intro course. Kate had done it before about 10 years ago, but did it again. And that's where I met Arya Vachin and Karuna Varcha. And let's face it, you know, those two people are, you know, they're pretty shiny. They're good to lean up against, really. And that was really, really welcoming. So really, you know, coming to the centre in drop-ins, that's where I met the yellow jewel, the Buddha, you know, that big picture that we've got up in the centre. That's where I met the Buddha for the first time. But when I did the intro course, then I started to kind of meet the Dharma. And so that's the blue jewel, really. So, you know, obviously after you do the intro course, you can come and do Sangha nights. And that's obviously the red jewel. So here I am now with all three in my lap, not really knowing that, to be fair. So yeah, you know, Sangha, coming to Sangha night, I was really skeptical. I was kind of like thinking, this can't be real. You know, this is not going to be sustained. And I had a lot of doubt, and I was looking for the whole, looking for, you know, it to be something that showed itself up for being something other than what it was. But every time I came, it was a real sense of connectedness. You know, you kind of leave the centre kind of really buzzy with positivity. You know, that was a bit weird. You know, you kind of come out with this shiny gaze, and you're looking around on the way to your bus stop, and the world looks very different. That's quite interesting. So when I came to the Sangha, when I came to the Sangha nights, I felt a bit uncomfortable, felt a bit shy. I remember feeling shy, but I did feel included, and I felt accepted. And despite looking for the holes, which never came, I just felt like I was accepted for who I was. So I didn't really give any thought to any differences, to be fair. But a bit like what Catherine said, in 2020, there was a number of things that kind of made me a bit more aware, a lot more aware. So that was the Brexit happenings in the UK, us leaving, the European Union. That really threw me. I work in the NHS, and it had a really significant impact on me in terms of people, work, lots of these things. The killing of George Floyd, definitely. And then the US presidential elections, they kind of shook me up somewhat. And then, of course, more recently, COVID. So, and all of these things had elements which started to make me sort of tune in a bit more about my experience, how I was meeting, what was going on. And I suppose I started to think a bit more about inequality in a big way. And I started to see some of the differences that I perhaps hadn't been so open to. And I started to notice that when I came to Sangha nights, that there was one course I came to, I think last January or something, I can't remember which one, but I was the only person of colour there, because Ayurveda wasn't in there on that one. I was the only one there. And it was a bit startling, actually. It was a bit startling and a bit uncomfortable and a bit sad. So yeah, like Ayurveda said, around October last year, he set up the People of Colour group. And to start off with, I like he said, I was resistant. I was like, oh no, what different? No, I'm the same. I want to be the same. What are you talking about? And I didn't, and I gave it some thought. I said no, I gave it some thought, and then I thought, hang on, what is this? What are you saying no to? So I kind of dropped it and went, I will. Let me go, and let's see what it's about. But initially, I was resistant. Yeah, which is quite interesting, really. And anyway, I joined the group, and it was very nourishing, actually, really nourishing to be in a collective where we could just talk about who we were, no different to any other group that I'm in, Buddhist group I'm in, but with people that maybe felt the space was a bit safer and a bit more open. So that was really helpful. And then, in addition to that, Ayurveda put me onto what do you call it, like a worldwide group that happened once a month, called Welcoming Liberation. And again, that was just like kind of a bit way out, really, because there's people from all over joining and talking about what was going on for them, so really interesting and really thought-provoking. And I have to say, it's added to my sense of learning who I am. We're just still happening, still going on, and I'm learning more and more and more about it. So opening to it, I guess, opening to it. I mean, there's other bits and bobs I can add, but I'm aware of time. So I think I'm just going to round up by saying that for me, in my experience of coming to Buddhism, mindfulness is caught, not taught. I've done a lot of trying to grab it, and it hasn't really worked. So yeah, caught, not taught. Share gently what I know with family, with others. I'm lucky to work in a job that allows me to do that every single time I'm there. Is to help people explore what's going on for them, and make changes if they want to. So that's really amazing. So go gently, go kindly, and open my heart. Open my heart and welcome what enters. Rejoice and be grateful. Be curious. How can I not be? I'm the excitable puppy. And I'm going to end with something that Jyoti said to me not that long ago. That's been really, really, really helpful, which is look for the beauty. Thank you.
Thank you very much, dear Gita. Yeah, it's a very lovely way of ending the talk. What I take from what you share is that sense of that journey of moving from ignorance to wisdom is also have to do with leaving behind assumptions that we have about ourselves. We sometimes we see ourselves in a particular light, and we believe that we are this particular version of ourselves, and circumstances change around us, and we discover something new about ourselves. It's just keeping things fresh, keeping that sense of possibilities always open to us. So now I want to invite somebody who is a new acquaintance, as it were. He's been coming along these Sangha nights very recently, I think, even probably this 6 weeks, 5 weeks, something like that, yeah. And Catherine was reflecting earlier on about, that kind of affinity that we establish with people. So our next guest is Darren. I'm going to invite him to come over here in a moment. And I met Darren a few weeks ago here in a Sangha night. And that was in an immediate sense of connection. You probably all have experienced this coming to the Sangha, meeting the Sangha, that suddenly you meet somebody and something clicks, yeah? And it's a sort of a recognition, as it were, of something. So something that immediately struck me about Darren is the similar journeys that we have shared. So Darren is an immigrant, as I am. He has a Catholic background, upbringing, as I do. And he's also, I don't know if he's going to talk about this tonight, but he's also a long distance father, as I am. And the thing that struck me about Darren is that at the end of the first, I think not even at the end, in the tea break of the first Sangha night that he came, he immediately wanted to know how he could get involved even more with the Sangha, what else he needed to do. And I invited him recently to attend an online group within Tirana, within this movement of support for fathers. And I couldn't be there that night, but I heard from the people that were there that Darren beautifully participated and contributed to the evening. So I'm waiting, following the note that Gita left us for Darren to share the beauty of his own journey. So.
Can I sit on your chair then? It's very high. So yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity to talk today. So good evening. My name is Darren. I've been coming here for only a few weeks now. But actually, my encounter with Buddhism, actually, it occurred about 20 years ago now. I'm 38 now. Originally, I'm from Malta, which is quite, it's basically Catholic, over 90% Roman Catholic. So I grew up with always the same sort of mentality. And Malta's not very well nowadays. It's different because even though it's an island, we have various nationalities, not just from Europe but also outside. But 20 years ago, Malta was quite. I don't want to say this, but it was quite a narrow-minded sort of type of culture. So I grew up with that kind of mentality where I felt this is my religion. This is the way we should think. This way of doing things. So it was quite just one way of thinking. But since I was very little, I had this, which I'm still going through it, obviously in daily life. But I always felt this this feeling of emptiness in me, that I couldn't actually understand what it is, because I was, I had my grandparents, I had my parents, I had basically every. I was not a child that I lacked anything. But I always felt a sort of a sense of emptiness and loneliness as well, even though I talked with a lot of people. So I had everything. I thought I had everything until one day my brother left and he went to the United States, and that made me even feeling more empty. And I tried to resolve it by, talking to people and even prayers and, different ways. But it didn't kind of help. In a way, actually, I felt worse. But what I appreciate these days is that it was the beginning of a journey for me, because that was when I started looking into myself, and rather than seeing a person which tries to be like the others, I started to be more a person who I'm more happy with just the way I am. And actually that attitude, that mindfulness actually attracted different types of people with a mentality an attitude that I actually connected more or enjoyed more. So I didn't meet any Buddhist in Malta at that time, but I encountered different books. And the first book I read about Buddhism was about the Dalai Lama and his it was a small book, and the Noble Truths. And I really enjoyed that book because it goes through the suffering of people. Obviously, some people suffering is not just physical, like we see in certain countries, or including this country, but also psychological, and it can also be spiritual suffering too, if you don't nourish your soul. So yeah, I enjoyed that book a lot because it spoke a lot about ignorance in a way that we sort of go in our life. We start something and continue, and without any, we do a lot of things, or I did a lot of things without putting any feeling or any consciousness. And I think that actually it was one main way for me of keep suffering in life, that I just do things and not giving time to sort of to nourish my soul. You can have my soul, you can have all the toys when you're little, or when you're older, you get into this relationships, and then you just go from one thing to another. And if you're not careful, you just keep doing the same mistake over and over again. It's just the circumstance is different, or the person is different. So of course, even after I encountered Buddhism, I still entered into relationships that I didn't truly want to. But what I enjoyed in the journey was that become more self-aware rather than self-centered. And another concept was about greed, about the noble truth. And it's true. Well, I can just say I go a lot sometimes with what I see or what I what I hear, or what's happening out there, and it's easy to get. I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago. It's easy to get caught in the sort of the web of the outside life, where you think. It's nice to have good food. It's nice to travel. It's nice to do this. It's nice to have a car. It's nice to have a marriage. But you can have everything, but you can have nothing actually. So there was a time where I thought I had everything, but actually I didn't have anything, and then there was a time also where I thought I ended up with nothing, but actually I ended up with more fullness because I had more time to explore myself. So I can say then, obviously I migrated to London, so I've been in UK for 12 years. And it wasn't an easy journey. But I have to say, I'm happy that, I moved from a country where everybody's the same to a country where everybody's different. And I'm so happy to be here where I can learn about different people and different cultures. And yes, it's true that you have to go through suffering in life, but that's the only way to grow, I feel. And what I can say is from the Sangha here, I'm happy that everybody can share and feel accepted. And I'm happy to be here because I'm learning more and more to accept myself how I am, and not just look at the physical or my psychological well-being, but also connect to the collective. And one thing I liked about Buddhism that it doesn't, it's not really shared in other religions, is that it focuses a lot on the inner self, and mentions the eightfold path, where one learns to control his senses thanks to meditation, mindfulness, control the senses for a more fuller life. Thank you very much for being part of my collective, and thanks for listening. And let's enjoy our life together. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Is that okay? Yep, good. Thank you very much, Darren. That was really moving. And yeah, thank you for sharing so fully your journey with us. So now we are going to change a bit. It's now the turn of Catherine to introduce our next two speakers. Yeah. Over to you, Catherine.
Yeah, first, thanks very much, Darren. That was very powerful. Yeah, so it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Jerry. So I'm fortunate enough to share a study group with Jerry. And the main qualities that I associate with her are warmth and generosity. She's always giving, whether that's her time and energy to other people, whether that's to the Sangha, her family, or her neighbors. So she just has that natural spirit of Dharna. Jerry's also very creative and innovative and is always looking for ways to live a more sustainable home life. So I always come away with inspiring ideas when meeting with Jerry. But a big part of Jerry's life is her son, Francis, whom she's a very dedicated parent to. So we have quite a few practicing parents in our community. And tonight, Jerry is going to touch upon, the experience of being a parent while practicing the 3 jewels. So yeah, I'm really happy to hand over to my friend, Jerry.
Oh, thank you, Catherine. That was really nice. Right. Oh yeah, Catherine asked me to speak tonight. I'm going to talk mostly about my identity as a parent. Well, as a Buddhist parent, I like to say now. There are many more parents that have much more experience than I do. People who've got like loads of kids or really grown-up kids that have been through the whole journey already. My little boy, Francis, is 7. But I suppose I'd describe myself as kind of being really in the thick of it. We home educate, so for me, being a parent's pretty kind of overwhelming. It's just kind of everything I do is with me all the time. But I would say that I've kind of come across Buddhism at the same time as I've been growing into my role as a parent. So what I'd like to talk about is kind of how the two have kind of been growing alongside each other and kind of where I find myself right now. I just want to do a bit of a trigger warning, I suppose, in a sense, because I know what a sensitive topic it is, becoming a parent, and how some people, it's something they really want and can't. It can be a triggering topic. So just a little note there. I was actually 43 when Francis came into the world. So I really understand the kind of the pain of being childless. We tried for many, many years, and I was just beginning to accept the fact that I probably wasn't going to have any children. My partner wasn't keen on the idea of adopting or fostering, and I hadn't discovered the Dharma at that point. There's a lot of societal conditioning that kind of pushes you towards having a family. And my biological clock was really, really loud. It was just like I could hear it ticking all the time. And the pain was pretty overwhelming, if I'm honest. So discovering I was pregnant was was a surprise, to say the least. I'd actually been turned away by the doctors for any kind of help, and it was just I just kind of got to this point of acceptance, and then I got pregnant. Those early days of sort of pregnancy and the birth, and proper in at the deep end, completely exhausted, everything new. Just the kind of the enormity of the responsibility of having this kind of new life that I could influence, and the mistakes that you can make. It's not like making a mistake at work, is it? You kind of think, oh, I'm gonna put all of this stuff on this child that they're gonna have to go to therapy for years to deal with. So it kind of felt this huge weight of responsibility. And then you start looking at, they always say there's no guidebook to being a parent. It's not true. There's millions millions of them, and they all say something different. And even worse, people in the queue at Sainsbury's, they all tell you what to do as well. So it was just kind of everywhere. It's as soon as you've got a bump, that's it. Everybody's all over you, and they're all telling you how to do it. And it was, again, overwhelming, I suppose. the other thing that was, we were talking about guidebooks and about how to be a parent, but I became really acutely aware of all of I used to refer to it as my blueprint, and this is before I knew anything about Buddhism at all. But I referred it to as my my sort of parenting blueprint. So it was what I'd been kind of given to me in terms of how I was brought up, and then I kind of recognised fairly early on how much that jarred with my partner's experience. And we would talk at length while we were pregnant about kind of how we were going to bring Francis up, and we wrote down some kind of key words about what sort of person we'd like him to be, and we challenged quite a few things. But it became very clear early on that there was so much conditioning. I didn't realise that's what it was, but so much conditioning and so complex that I just realised that I was going to have to somehow question everything and trust my own instincts. I thought, how on earth do you question everything and trust your instincts? It didn't make any sense. But I was really into it. I got straight into life as a mother. I really wanted everything to be perfect. I used to carry him in a wrap, and I practiced attachment parenting, did baby signing. And my baby didn't actually sleep for 2 years. He slept for a maximum of 40 minutes at a time. So I did actually feel like I was going insane. If I'm honest, I lived on adrenaline, Google, and sugar. And I would get as much information as I could. I researched everything that I could. I was really focused. But what I didn't realise at the time was that I was so focused on trying to be this perfect parent that I kind of missed a lot of the signs that my partner was sort of heading into a bit of a free fall and towards a breakdown. And we had a very difficult time, which kind of, at that point, that's what drew me to the centre. I needed something, and it was a therapist who actually pushed me towards learning how to meditate. She felt that I had enough skills now, so I suppose, to kind of help myself, but that I needed space to do it. And she pointed me towards the Buddhist centre, and Francis was 4 at the time. And embracing the 3 jewels, I can just describe it really as the ultimate parent guidebook. It's all those other things that have been written, just forget it. It's so interesting that I can't imagine parenting without the Dharma now. I think Buddhism comes first. It's like it's there with every situation in every part of a daily life. I apply it. Taking some time out to talk about this topic, I realised that I used to get really frustrated when I was first coming to the centre, that I couldn't carve out the time to meditate enough, to study, to come to Sangha. And I felt like I was missing out so much. And what I've realised now, actually, that my practice has now just become truly, truly practical. It's become integrated into everything that I do with Francis. He's reaching that age now, he's 7, and he has additional needs and stuff. So we have quite a lot of breakdowns and meltdowns and stuff, but we're able to kind of talk through each situation and recognize that, we sort of live with the suffering. We recognize it. We sit with it kindly. We talk about impermanence. And so it's just like every situation that we kind of come across, there's something there in the Dharma to help us and to guide us. It was in the early days for me, my practice was, I used to call it as a sort of bit of reprieve from the relentlessness of it all. I used to use this word called constantness, which isn't a word. But what's happened now is that rather than my practice being a break from it, it's become the constantness. That makes sense. It's become the constant. And that's been a big shift for me. So in terms of Dharma and parenting, we're really honest. I'm really honest with Francis about a lot of things. I think truthfulness is kind of really key. And I think Gita was saying about being truthful and everything, but doing it in a very kind and gentle way. So you don't want to freak him out. But we've been really working hard at developing empathy. We've had some very funny looks in Aldi as Francis has been empathizing with the dead prawns in the freezer. Oh, poor him. And it's, like I say, I can't imagine being a parent without the Dharma, because being a parent of a child in this day and age is really difficult, because it's just such a horrible capitalist society that we live in at times. So just navigating Christmas and stuff, and sort of talking to him about having a bit of a more of a simple life, and looking at contentment as being a thing rather than, you know, a session on the Wii or whatever. It's trying to provide that balance to all of that external stimulus that's out there, and in a way that doesn't kind of exclude him from his friends, in a way that he's able to look at his friends and still recognize that they are different. I think this is probably one of the key points I wanted to make, was that what's happened is we've become a team, and I don't want to indoctrinate Francis in any way. What we've kind of done is I've taught him to question everything, including me, which might not have been a wise decision, but he questions me all the time. And we've just, because he's just got to that age now, an interesting age, he's now started pointing out all of my unskillful behavior. So he will, which does happen a lot because it's quite stressful, so he will say, that wasn't very skillful, and then he'll tell me why. So it's actually we've become like that. This, I feel like I'm on a bit of a fast track, Buddhism fast track, because I've got this kind of little guru and we help each other. So by sort of being open to things that he has to say, and at times when it's really, really challenging, and it's in between all the kind of talks of Lego and Star Wars and everything else, sometimes he just blows my mind. He'll just come out with something that's just so beautiful. And I think in many ways, there's got this soul who hasn't got the layers and layers and layers and layers of conditioning that I have. I'm 50, you know, I've got a lot of this stuff. I only discovered Buddhism in my 40s, so there's an awful lot of conditioning there. And he's really, really, yeah, we've formed this really good team. And I'm quite excited about where it's going to go. If I'm honest, being a mother does restrict my ability. You know, I'm a mother of a younger child, I suppose. It restricts my ability to be as engaged with the Sangha as I'd really like. And it's something that, you know, managing sort of feelings of guilt is quite tricky. You know, I've not been on a retreat yet. It's something I'd really, really love to do. I don't think I've not felt able to do it yet. You know, it's constantly weighing up and justifying, you know, being present or being absent when you're kind of needed. And I think in a way you can get a bit, when your life is kind of intense and you've got all of this attention, you know, being required of you all the time, you can get a bit locked in your own experience. Like you say, this, like Catherine, you said, sometimes you're in your own little bubble of experience. And I'd say especially in the last year or so, in a way, I know, Geeta, you were saying about, you know, being exposed to a lot more, but I suppose for me what's happened, because I've been caring for Francis, but also caring for elderly parents, we've kind of been in this locked in, I've been looking inward a lot more. And I kind of, it's a guilt, I suppose, but I feel like I was very politically active. I was very active before Francis came along, and I feel now that as he's getting older, it's important to kind of get reconnected more and to look outwards. And by being a parent of Francis, and seeing directly the impact that the Dharma has on him, it's kind of a way of recognizing the difference that you can make in the wider world. It's like a little microcosm of the difference that you can have. So I'm really looking forward to being more involved with the Sangha and hopefully, yeah, meeting more people. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Jerry. That was really great. And yeah, so I'm pleased to introduce our final speaker of the night, Connor. Now, I've met Connor mainly through delivering introductory courses together. And the quality that immediately struck me when meeting Connor was that he had a very passionate and enthusiastic energy for the three jewels. So yeah, his dedication to the spiritual life came across very strongly right from the start. And another thing that struck me about Connor was his keen sense of humour, which is a quality that I can always appreciate in anyone. So Connor is a going for refuge Mitra, which means that he's requested ordination. And he's also recently moved back to Nottingham from Colchester and into the men's community who live just above the Buddhist centre. And Connor is also a proud member of the LGBTQ community and has a boyfriend, Rob, who he visits regularly. And tonight, Connor will be talking about his experiences. So I'm really pleased to hand over to Connor.
Thank you very much, Catherine. So as with where everybody else has started, I'm going to start with my journey to Buddhism, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about how my identity within the LGBT community interacts with Buddhism in certain ways. So I'll pick the story up while I'm doing my degree down in Colchester. I studied computer science. I'm now a software engineer. And I'd moved out, I'd moved down south. I grew up here in Nottingham, obviously. Well, maybe not obviously, actually, but I grew up here in Nottingham. So I'd moved down to Colchester to study. And during the course of my studies, initially it was great fun. Initially, I really enjoyed it. There was copious amounts of booze, as there are for a lot of people, and I really enjoyed the social life of it. The course wasn't too bad, it wasn't too difficult, I was getting by. But as time went on, things started to change a little bit, and I did an internship at Rolls-Royce as a software engineer midway through the degree, so I took a year out. And it was during this year, this is 2015-16, things started to feel not quite right. I wasn't connected with very many people, but during my time at Rolls-Royce, I'd moved again and I was only there for a year, so I didn't really have that long to form any friendships. During that time, I was obviously working, so I didn't have too much time to dedicate to sort of nurturing those friendships. And it was during that year as well that things started to look a little bit strange with the world. We mentioned earlier, a couple of people have mentioned earlier, 2016 being, it felt like a turning point, didn't it? We had what happened in America with the elections, we had Brexit, we had really the start of the climate crisis. I can remember some of the really quite bad floods that happened that year as well. That was a bit of a wake-up call. So things started to feel not quite right around that time. And it was also around that time that I'd started to come out as gay. It was while I was working at Rolls-Royce that this started to happen. And one thing that's sort of not often realised, especially by members outside of the LGBT community, in the process of coming out, it isn't simply sort of walking up and saying to somebody, by the way, this. You've first got to accept it in and of yourself. The first person I came out to is myself. I'd had vague ideas for quite a long time, but there was a lot of self-denial that happened. I knew there was this particular attraction in my life that didn't quite line up with the way everybody else was. But I mean, looking back, the mental gymnastics I went through to sort of try to avoid confronting that fact, it boggles the mind how I managed to get away with it for as long as I did. But get away with it, I did. So the first person I had to really come out to is myself. I had to accept myself first before I could then sort of bring anybody else into that world. So I had all this going on during the time where the world felt like it was starting to drift towards more intolerance to certain communities, and my own identity as a gay man being one of them. But at the same time, outside of, for example, the world of politics, it felt like I was being accepted a lot more. It felt like LGBT individuals were being accepted far more than they were. So there's this weird parallelism going on, and it was, and I do feel like I've seen the shift in my lifetime towards acceptance. But where this led was to my mental health starting to deteriorate. And this was accelerated by when I moved back to university. Obviously, I was now in my final year, so things were considerably harder in terms of the course. But on top of that, because I'd taken that year out, most of my friends had graduated, they'd got jobs up and down the country, they'd moved on. There were a few people left that I still knew, but not very many of them. So again, it was like starting from scratch. And again, it was in a position where I didn't really have the time I necessarily needed in order to sort of cultivate and nurture those connections. So during that time, my mental health continued to get worse. And if I'm honest, I'd come out as gay, but at the same time, there was still certain parts of me that didn't accept the fact. And I can remember a number of nights while I was a student in that final year, lying awake in my bed thinking, well, I am this way, but I really, really don't want to be. And I'd do anything to get rid of it. So I'd accepted, well, I am, but I'd not accepted that this was an okay way to be. Even though society was becoming steadily more accepting of it, I still didn't want to be this particular way that I was. And that took a lot longer to really sort of integrate into my experience. So off of the back of this, I did go ahead and find some therapy. I intermitted my final year, meaning I took a break. I ended the final year there, didn't do any more on that particular year. And took a little bit of time to try to sort of heal myself, as it were, tried to sort of, put myself in a better position before going back and attempting my final year for a second time. And that helped a lot, and I was in a much better position. But then sort of things happened that I'm not going to go into too much for various and sundry reasons. Do talk to me privately if you are interested, that sent me spiraling again. And this one wasn't so easy to fix. But this time I couldn't intermit again. I'd run out of student loans. There was no way I could do any more because I couldn't really afford to fund it privately. I was reliant on those loans. So I had to plough through. I had to carry on anyway, which I did. And then I got a job, and that was that. But things still weren't right. I'd moved on, I got my job, but still things weren't right. Still I was going through a lot of this suffering. And I remembered at one point, having read goodness knows how long before, that Buddhism can help with mental health, can help with depression and anxiety, both of which I suffered with. So I decided one day, completely random actually, I'm not quite sure what prompted me to do it when I did, but I looked up, is there any Buddhism near me? And there was a Colchester Buddhist centre. It belonged to Sri Ratna. I'd never heard of Sri Ratna at the time. So I decided to go along. And maybe a month later, I finally plucked up the courage to do exactly that. It took me a little bit of time to find the courage, partly coming from an atheist background, now moving into religion. That was quite a strange experience. And wasn't a world I was used to. But eventually I found the courage, and eventually I decided I'll pop along and I'll see what it's about. And in the worst case, I can just not come again. And I remember that first night quite vividly for two reasons. Firstly, it was the week after Bhante passed away. And all of the order members and all of the GFR Mitras, the senior Mitras, the people that have been around a very long time, were in a state of shock and mourning, and I can remember not really quite understanding why that was, because there's this man, he founded this movement, fine, but these people don't necessarily know him. And fair enough, one or two may have done, but that felt a little bit strange to me, and I understand a lot better now where that comes from. There's an immense amount of sort of gratitude and almost reverence towards him for what he did for quite a lot of people, and indeed that connection I've now got myself, but at the time it was a bit of a shock. And the second reason I remember it very vividly, and this is really what kept me coming back, I think, is that first night I was taught to do the Metta Bhavana. Now, I'd already been doing a little bit of mindfulness meditation before this, on and off, mostly off. But I was taught to do the Metta Bhavana. And I was doing this, and in the person I put in stage 4, not a particularly difficult person at the time, we'd had a bit of an argument, things weren't fantastic in our friendship, and there was quite a lot of blame towards him for that. But there in the back of my mind, while I was meditating, Connor, you're not being very patient with this person. So I went to him after the class had finished and we'd all gone home, and I apologized, and our friendship started to get a little bit better. Oh, there's something here. This works. So I kept coming back and I finished the intro course, and then I did another intro course because I kind of started halfway through the cycle. So I decided I'll do another one just to kind of catch up on the bits that I missed. Because of the way Colchester does it, it's not sort of everybody starts at a given point. You can come and go as you like. At least that's the way they did it when I did the intro course. And then I went on to Sangha nights and learned some other interesting meditations, and it all kind of went from there. So a year later, I asked to become a mitra, which I did. The ceremony was lovely. That was off of the back of bringing quite a lot of forgiveness into my life for quite a lot of very difficult people. That was a whole process. It took me quite a long time to get to that point, but I worked and worked and worked within the Metta Bhavana and the various other Brahmaviharas to forgive certain individuals for a role they played in my life, and to forgive myself for my role in those events as well, which is what prompted me then to request to become mitra. Off of the back of a pilgrimage to some of the holy sites in India and Nepal, I then decided to request ordination. So that's sort of how I found Buddhism and how I found myself in the position that I am. So now I'm going to switch tracks very slightly and just ponder slightly how the LGBT community and Buddhism interact, because it's a little bit interesting in certain ways, and there is admittedly a little bit of prejudice that comes into this equation, but not in the way you'd think. From within the Tree Ratna community, I've not received any prejudice whatsoever for being the way that I am, for having the identity that I do, and for having the way of life that I do, unless of course it starts to drift in towards unskillfulness, which has happened from time to time. I'm not ordained yet, I'm not enlightened yet. That happens to us all, doesn't it? But from the other perspective, within the LGBT community, I find one of two things happens when I talk to people sometimes. Either people have a very, very rigid view of religion, or they have a very fixed view of what a Buddhist is. And I do have to do a little bit of work sometimes when meeting somebody new to dispel a few of these myths. It's not necessarily all, well, in fact, it's never met with sort of scorn and condemnation, but I do get met with a little bit of apprehensiveness sometimes. Oh, he's Buddhist. Oh, goodness. Yeah, and it comes with one or two places. Religion has a certain view within the LGBT community of being obviously very against that way of life. You know, you look at, for example, the Catholic Church, which until very recently has been very against gay people, has been very against transgendered people, and all of those wonderful other identities within the LGBT community. And people do sometimes assume, because I am a man of religion, that do I share those same views? Simultaneously, the other side of that is people have a particular view of the way Buddhists are. And when you say Buddhist to somebody who's not necessarily met any Buddhists before, the first thing that comes into their head is somebody with a shorn head and wearing an orange robe. So I do often get questions of, am I an ascetic? Am I celibate? Am I all these other things that various Buddhists don't no doubt practice in the way that they do, but that isn't necessarily a part of Tree Ratna and isn't necessarily part of my practice. And that's sometimes met with the view of, because a particular person isn't necessarily practicing in a certain way and isn't necessarily celibate and perhaps might be quite sexually free, am I going to judge them because I'm Buddhist? Now, obviously, everybody in this room knows that's not the case. But when I'm the first Buddhist somebody meets, they don't necessarily know that. They have this view in their mind. Because I am often the first Buddhist people meet. I once got asked, because I use the Dharma chakra, the wheel of the Dharma, as my profile picture on some of the social media that I use. And I once got asked, Connor, are you really into naval history? Are you really into old ships? Which I thought was quite funny. I didn't expect that one. So I am the first Buddhist that a lot of people do meet. And I do have to kind of, occasionally just blow away a few myths that might sometimes come with that. But that's always met really, really well. And usually there's a lot of follow-on questions that come along from that, because people do tend to be quite curious. And once I dispel the myths that I'm going to judge them for something that I don't want to judge them for, or that I condemn their way of life when I don't, or that I'm not one of them when I do identify in this way. So it is often met with curiosity, but there is sometimes a little bit of apprehensiveness there, which I do need to try to meet. And that one, yeah, that was something I didn't expect when I started to become Buddhist. I didn't expect that there'd be prejudice, not in the direction of, well, I'm gay and that's not okay, but rather I'm Buddhist and that's not okay. That one was a bit of a surprise to me. So yeah, that was, in short form, my history of being a Buddhist and how that gels with being a gay man. So thank you all.